Sir, please start the webinar.
Good evening, sir. I am 𝐀𝐥𝐭𝐫𝐬𝐿, your host. I am a director of Association of Financial Advisor of India and Research in India, who is a merchant banker and providing technical economic viability study for that. I think today webinar, we are going to discuss the infrastructure sector and alternative funds requirements. So you are aware that infrastructure play a very important role to develop the economy. When we are talking about the developed country like USA or China or other European countries, so infrastructures played very important role for their developments. Nation envisages about 5 trillion economy in 2025. For that infrastructure, more than 1 lakh crore rupees is required. Either we are talking about the social infrastructure, where the educations, affordable housing, hospitals are required. And we are also talking about the economic infrastructure, where the roads, communications, port, railways, airports are required. In any cities, when airport is coming or railway station is coming or communications are coming, there is a development is taking place in any place for that. To develop, we require funds. Funds are being managed at present mostly by the bankers. For bankers, there is a assets liability mismatch. Because for infrastructure, funds are required for a longer period, not for a shorter periods. So banker is taking a deposit for a maximum period of 10 years. Lekin mostly people of 1 or 2 years, 3 years, people are depositing the things. That mismatch is there. For that, we require alternative funding. Either we are talking about the pension funds, or we are talking about the insurance funds, we are talking about the private equity, we are talking about the venture funds, and we are also talking about the infrastructure funds that is also created. We are also talking about the national investment and infrastructure funds, with the 49% holding of the government of India, and rest are from the ICICI Bank and HDFC Bank, Axis Bank, Kotak banks. These funds are being created. So we are going to discuss in details what are the alternative funding or requirement are there. We are eminent speaker with us. I will be coming to one by one to discuss in details. So we are with us Shri Hitesh Shah, who is the founder and director of SK FinCap Advisor Private Limited. Having more than 20 plus year of cross of corporate finance, investment banking, fund management business in various leadership roles, headed investment banking, public issue of debts, and loan syndications. Instrumental in mobilizing funds for infrastructure. This is the most important. He mobilized so many funds for the infrastructures, companies, corporates, banks, NBFCs. Over 35,000 crore rupees. Mr. Shah, just I want to know from you the recent trends in infrastructure finance in India and improvement the access of finance for corporates, because we are talking about the alternative funding choice. This is infrastructure trust funds are also created. What do you feel? You are also expert in the bond market. You are also expert in the private equity and venture capitals. Mr. Shah, what are your thought about that? I hand over to Mr. Shah, sir.
Thank you, Gupta ji, for this opportunity, and good afternoon to all the participants. Okay, so when it comes to infrastructure funding, traditionally across the world, you differentiate between what is the during construction and what is post construction. To talk of specifics, so my entire discussion, I would try to focus on pre-construction, which is during construction phase, and post COD. During construction phase in India, fortunately, unfortunately, banks remain the only source of debt funding in India today. For two primary reasons is one, banks are the primary risk takers of debt in India. And second, it has also to do with the fund that in India, even today, during construction phase, the lenders want to do a lot of monitoring of the progress and use of funds, how the funding is being used. Unlike a lot of other advanced economies, where even during the construction phase, bond market is quite active. However, in India, essentially, primarily because of reason of wanting to ensure end use and the development growth of construction, banks remain the primary funding on the during the construction phase. Once the construction phase is complete, ideally that's the phase at which we always advise all our clients that that's the phase at which you should give exit to all your existing bankers, because the primary risk is over, and the asset needs to be repriced, the debt needs to be repriced, and you are looking at much longer tenure, which essentially bank is, you did not take bank's money at that stage, and let the bank's exposure come down and come back again at your construction phase. So on the post-construction phase, there are multiple avenues available today, which perhaps were not available 8-10 years back. We have bond market. In fact, a lot of cases, whether it is road, whether it is, grid sector, where, we have transmission line projects and all, even on that, pipelines, where it is more of a assured or a steady cash flow, whether it is in the form of annuity, whether it is in a form of a take-or-pay agreement, or whether it is in the form of a settled flow or a estimated flow of cash. For example, in a solar project, where that this is the steady, power generation capability, means plus minus 2%, then you could look at lower level, and so there is a more assured, projectable kind of cash flow. There, insurance you get it rated, you issue a bond against it. Insurance companies are long-term investors. There are PFs which invest into these kind of bonds. Two new additional funding opportunities are there, which is infrastructure debt fund, as Gupta ji was mentioning in IF. So essentially, there are three very active infra debt funds in India today. One is, as Gupta ji said, one which is promoted by NIF, where Government of India is the primary promoter. Then there is a fund which is promoted by banks, ICICI Bank, which is infra debt fund, and then there is L&T funded, promoted, essentially 100% is owned by L&T, which is the L&T debt fund. These are again guys who can give long-term funding across the entire infrastructure, whether it is road, power, renewable energy, all of those sectors. A new sector which has come up in last 3-4 years is InvIT, which can be listed, which can be unlisted. In fact, InvIT, we believe, is a excellent form of raising long term. Of course, today the regulators require that essentially if it has to be listed, it has to be at least AAA if the debt is more than 49%, or AA. But InvIT is a very good opportunity. But our experience in India so far, or even the discussion that we are, witnessing, essentially, if it is going to be a AAA, the debt is going to be AAA, only then there is demand for InvIT. But that, we believe, is a very, very effective tool. In fact, we advise clients that, give exit to your bankers, get it refinanced, but even the developer should get out of, once the asset has become operational, it's a pure, yield play, depending on, 7%, 8%, 10%, 11%. One, it's an yield play. The infra developer needs to understand that, their expertise is into execution, analyzing the project, and getting a COD. Once it is done, then it's a pure yield play. Let long-term investor who are interested in just getting yield take over that asset. So once an InvIT is done, you can sell the InvIT. You can, hold, just be a passive investor as unit holder, and let somebody, purely operationally run the project. and you get your equity back, or you sell your units, or you can raise money against in unit and put as equity in new projects. So InvITs are excellent way of raising money. Of course, all these things are still evolving. There are certain regulatory challenges. For example, in InvIT, last year IRDA allowed insurance companies to invest into units of debt of InvIT, but there the restriction is only 3% of their AUM, which is not a large sum. But we believe these are still early days. Going forward, things will improve and regulator will get more comfort, and a lot of these long-term investors will start participating. So that essentially, in nutshell, is how we look at the entire infra funding scenario.
Very important, Mr. Shah, what you're telling about the pre-construction and post-construction. I think this is a new concept has come, where a pre-construction finance is given by the banks, and where minimized risk are there, post-construction is taken by the bonds of some market. Sir, your point are well taken. You are also expert in the public issue, sir, and you are headed a public issue also. So what do you suggest for the infrastructure, whether this public issue can be there? I've seen some public issue in respect of the real estate, and they were very, very successful these days. So what do you feel that for infrastructure project, I'm talking about the maximum for the roadways, road project is coming in a big way. How you feel that the public issue can be useful for the infrastructure in the roads?
So InvIT, of course, you get you do a listed InvIT, do a private placement, or do a public issue. There are substantial demand for it, because InvIT, by the current regulations, are very steady flow of cash. The regulations are built such a way 90% of cash has to be distributed. You can't hold that money. It has to be 90% of assets have to be operational assets. So very limited risk. There is substantial demand, and I think that's a good way. Essentially, what we have observed so far, because there are very few, about 12, 13 of InvITs which are listed in India today, and very few have been public issues, limited. If I were to include even REIT, that's been 12, 15, couple of them have been, not privately placed like a public issue. So there is enough demand for it, and it's an excellent way of, post-construction raising money from public, because essentially you need large public participation that can come only by way of public issues.
So, sir, these real investment funds, have any view on that?
So essentially, REIT and InvIT are essentially, two product classes. REIT is essentially for, annuity yielding real estate, essentially commercial assets, and InvIT is for infra assets. So, of course, our regulators differentiate between what is called as REIT and what is called as InvIT. But underlying, these are steady flow of cash, future cash flow, which can be priced effectively. That's how the investors look at that.
Thank you very much, sir. I will come back to you again.
Thank you.
So now I'm coming to Mr. Chandrasekhar, V. Chandrasekhar. He is a senior advisor, IBA. He was general manager with State Bank of India, looking after the corporates, mid corporates, and trade finance. He is postgraduate, CA IIB. I think he has a long experience in the banking sector, sir. So, sir, just I want to know, Mr. Chandrasekhar, what is your recent advancement in infrastructure financing? Because as in my opening remarks also told, that to achieve a 5 trillion economy, infrastructure play a very important role. Whether you're talking about the China or you're talking about the USA, they develop with the development of the infrastructures. Being IBA authorities for the banker, how you feel, sir? How you rated this infrastructure financing, and especially infrastructure investment funds that you trust? How you feel like that, sir? Give your thoughts, sir. Chandrasekhar, sir.
Yeah. Actually, if you look at it, the entire problem about infrastructure.
तो थोड़ा अपना वो ठीक कर लीजिए सर, इसमें जो आपका है वीडियो ठीक कर लीजिए, अपना कैमरा ठीक कर लीजिए. You're not coming full. Now it is okay.
Right now?
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank
Am I also audible?
Audible, sir. Audible, sir.
Yeah,
Everything
fine.
is
Okay.
everything.
Sir, the whole challenge about infrastructure funding is that actually, today in the market, actually the lenders available are very limited in nature, actually, and essentially they are bond banks as well as the bond market. Both of these, lenders are in a class where they can provide only short-term funding. They cannot do long-term funding. That is the biggest challenge that is faced in the infrastructure segment. Okay. So if you are talking about a growing industry which will be requiring increasing funding requirements, actually, and and to reach the sort of challenges we have set for ourselves, then we have to look at the alternate source of funding. That is inevitable. Okay. Now, if you look at it, we are already on this way, actually. But then, what are the things that are happening world over? Actually, if you just look at it, one product which is coming up is something called a project bonds. Project bonds are specific bonds issued for an infrastructure project, wherein the repayment generally in a bond is on a fixed basis, actually, in a sense, a bullet basis, actually. At the end of the term of the bond, we repay the amount, actually. Till then, we pay the coupon, actually. That is the normal bond structure, actually. But in a project bond, apart from payment of interest, there is a periodic repayment of the principal also. So what happens effectively, the term of the bond, average life of the bond comes down, and also the interest outgo also reduces over a period of time. It is like a term loan which is being repaid in installments, actually. So this set of bond are being utilized actually abroad very much actually for funding the thereby reducing the interest cost, actually. That's one product that comes to my mind initially. And then InvITs, as you said, is a great a way of unlocking the funds that have been employed already in a project. Essentially, InvITs are for actually projects which have already been completed and where cash flows have started happening, actually. So InvIT, as my previous speaker said, actually could be in the form of a listed actually or unlisted entity. It's essentially a trust, actually, wherein the assets are housed and the cash flows accrue in the trust, actually, and that is being distributed to the unit holders as a dividend, actually. So this is a very tax efficient structure, and and slowly the trend of assets being housed in the InvIT is developing in India, actually, as my previous speaker said. Already 12-13 successful InvITs have been floated, actually, and they are performing very well. And year by year, their operating income is going up, and their dividend declaration is also going up. So InvIT is an excellent form of investment that is available. Okay. Other than that, we have the capital market structure of issuance of shares, actually. Mostly, actually, the preference share is preferred for this sector, whereby the shareholders get a preference over the dividend payment. Actually. So that is one option, actually, as far as the promoter is concerned. If he is willing to cede some sort of control, actually, and share the one, actually, then issuance of share is a very good because that also restricts the amount of interest outgo. So thereby the returns will be much better, actually, if it is partly funded by a share issuance. Okay, that is one aspect of it, actually. And then we have we have other modes of funding also, whereby you can have debt from the infrastructure development fund, which have been recently actually we have ICICI, IDFC, and IFCL who have floated this infrastructure development fund exclusively directed towards funding the infrastructure projects, actually. These are all long-term funds, actually, at a much lower rates, actually, for enabling the corporates to complete their projects and then pay the loans, actually, out of their cash flows after the project gestation is over. Actually. So IDF is one avenue for financing it, and other than that, actually, you have other sources of return. Actually, you have the toll operate transfer mode, actually, where the infrastructure, especially the road sector, the asset is transferred to an toll operator who pays the an agreed sum upfront, actually, and then he collects the toll, and then he appropriates his own investment. Actually, that's the toll operate and transfer method. Actually, that is another way of unlocking the the funds that are already employed into an yielding asset. Actually. So these are all the trends that are observed in the market, sir.
Thank you, Chandrasekhar. Likini, you are talking about the project bonds. You're talking
Sir.
about the issuance of share. You're talking about the toll operators.
Yeah.
Something like that. Sir, there is a PP model is there, private partnership.
Private
I
partnership.
think
Yeah.
it is coming in a big way to
Absolutely.
finance the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Because it is not possible for the government to go on investing under the roads, bridges, or something like that, even port also, sir. So, what do you feel about the private partnership, sir?
Sir, it has been very successful. If you look at it, actually, there are so many sectors in this private and public partnership. Road sector, then aviation sector is one thing which I can think of straight away. If you look at some of the major airports that are operating in India, be it Delhi, be it Bombay, it's all in the PPP mode actually, where the developer and the sponsoring agency together, they share the cost of development, and then the developer is given a long-term concession to earn out of the cash flows out of the this project. It is got an assured term actually, and the typical terms are 30 years, 40 years actually, and the revenue sharing happens between the the private entity as well as the government actually. So this is one a very good avenue where due to the inherent limitations of the government to fund to raise capital, and the capital is being brought in by a private entity. So this subscribes to the development of the market. That's point number one. Point number two, it includes it introduces some amount of efficiency by of the private operators actually. So that is also another aspect of the PPP model actually. So PPP is very successful, sir, and it has been employed by the government in so many areas actually, and the success is visible. And going forward, I think that could be the model the government is going to adopt on high value projects.
Very nicely, sir. Sir, now these days, to control the inflations, repo rate are being increased.
Yeah.
So it is a directly linked with the borrowing because
Yeah.
once the repo increase, so bank immediately increase the you can say rate of interest, and it is affecting because this infrastructure is a long term financing.
Yeah.
Everybody doing for the profit. The economic viability is the most important aspect. Have you any suggestion for the infrastructure firms who are listening to us, how they can cut the rate of interest? Because the banker sometimes is doing the only rating models. If rating is okay or internal rating is okay, they can play with the rate of interest because risk factor is somewhat reduced. Lekin once the rate of interest is going to increase, because rating is very difficult for the infrastructure, because it is long term, so all the rating agencies are not giving double A, triple A, as Mr. Shah sir were telling, triple A rated company or double A rated company, where the bond market is available and it is a rate of interest like that. So, have you any view for that? How the rate of interest can be benchmark or can be reduced, something like that?
Sir, particularly from the point of view of the rating, I have some good news actually. So either to see the rating agencies are rating the companies, irrespective of the nature of the company, whether it is infrastructure or a manufacturing company or a trading company, whatever it is actually, the basis on which it is being rated is on two principles. One is called the probability of default, and other one is the loss given default. These are the two actually basis on which the rating is being shown. In this methodology, the problem is actually the basic principle is even one day default is treated as a default, and that results in drastic downgradation actually. Okay, so that that increases the cost of the funds actually substantially. Now there is a new thinking. If you look at the infrastructure project, the unique characteristic of infrastructure project is actually there is an assured cash flow by way of the contractual obligations. That is point number one. There's a long-term cash flows actually. It's not short-term cash flows. That's point number two. Point number three, the contractual obligation also provide for certain payments in terms of in case of the termination of the contract actually. Okay, so even when the contract is terminated, depending upon the time at which it has been terminated and what is the investment I think going in, there is an assured repayment that is available to the lender actually from the sponsoring agency. That is point number 3. And point number 4, the contract also provides for the lender to substitute the to the developer. Okay, like if a developer for any reason is not able to complete his obligation, then the lender with the permission of the sponsoring agency can substitute the developer actually with a person of their choice actually. So that ensures the continuity of execution, ensures the continuity of operations and the cash flows. So these are all the sort of unique characteristics that are available in an infrastructure project, which is not available in a manufacturing company or a trading company. So the thought is actually, even though yes, actually there is a probability of default action, there is a loss given default, measurement is there. It is to an extent mitigated by these inbuilt features of the infrastructure contracts, which provides for an assured cash flow over a long period of time, and also some terminal payments actually, and also substitution of the the developer. So the actual loss that is suffered in the infrastructure project is much less than what has been projected by way of the PD-LGD method. So this is what has been established. So now the rating agencies as well as the infrastructure companies have got into a huddle, and then now actually they have developed a concept called the expected loss method, ELM method actually of rating. What it does is actually, even though it does take care of the loss given default, it also takes into account what are all the mitigating factors that are available by way of assured cash flows and your payments actually on termination and things actually. So to that extent, it reduces the possible loss if there is a default. Okay, so once the possibility of a loss is reduced, the credit risk decreases, and consequently the spreads also come down actually. So this is a very good tool for pricing of infrastructure project actually. So very active soon discussions are going on about in understanding this methodology and how this can be introduced for at least for infrastructure sector. That is the thought that is going on, sir. Hopefully, I think the regulator is also getting interested. The government is already interested. Okay, the rating agencies are interested, banks are interested. So all the stakeholders are interested in this methodology. So it is only a question of actually implementing it, understanding it, and implementing it actually. So once that happens, the ratings will be more realistic. It will be more aligned to the possible losses, and thereby actually that will help the companies to decrease or reduce their cost of borrowing. This is the major development that is going to happen, sir, in the field of infrastructure. This I can share with you.
Very nice, very nice, sir. I think this a new concept is coming under a rating system. If it is a cash flow, assured cash flow rating can be there, I think it can be helpful for the infrastructure. So, Chandrasekhar, one point is there because we are talking about the assets-based lending. Now the concept is undergoing a change to a cash flow lending.
Cash flow.
Have any thought in the IBS or in that respect?
Sir, actually, in fact, if you look at it, there is a movement towards even in manufacturing industry for that matter. The assessment should be based on cash flows. Actually. That's what the latest thinking is, because ultimately, whatever be the book profit, whatever be ultimately what is the cash on hand, and as there is an adage, cash is the king. Okay, so increasingly the bankers are also focusing on the cash flow method of assessment actually, and cash flow method of lending. Actually. That is coming in, sir. In fact, actually, to an extent, actually for MSMEs, and I think they have already started applying this methodology. And for a large corporate, actually, they are just looking at the cash flows and how to assess it, and what are the parameters, and how to rate it, and I think these things are happening. For the large borrowers, also going forward, actually, we expect the cash flow based method of lending to stabilize and to come in and to stabilize it. Yeah.
Very nicely, sir. Just I am telling you for the information of the audience, for the sugar industry, I think that was the cash flow lending. There is a deficit of the cash flow they are implemented, and they are very successful for that also. I think if banker can consider for cash flow lending instead of a assets-based lending, I think it will be useful for the manufacturing sector, infrastructure also, another sector also. Sir Chandrasekhar, sir, I will come back to you again.
Yeah, thank
now
you.
I'm coming to Shri Rahul Jain, who is insolvency professional. FCA, Association of Insolvency Professionals, fellow member of Institute of Chartered Accountants, and CFA, level 3 candidates with over 16 years of experience in financial reporting. He is the first person I've seen that in the first attempt, he passed a CA. So congratulations, sir, and very intelligence is reflect in May 2005. He is a registered valuer also. Financial modeling, restructuring, and deep knowledge of the corporate finance. As a insolvency professional, he has performed several engagement relating to infrastructure sector. I think he's the right person to talk about the stress assets and how the restructuring under a infrastructure project can be see the order of the day, because the infrastructure is very important sector, and some real estate infrastructure, we are talking about the power sector, they are somewhat in difficult position sometimes. Now I think they are coming out of the some stress levels. So, sir, what is your views about the restructuring of the infrastructure sector, sir? Because you are helm affair of the restructuring. So, give, sir, your viewpoint, Mr. Jain. Jain, sir.
Yes. So basically, sir, there are two types of leverages which a business generally faces. One is operational leverage, and another one is the financial leverage. So operational leverage basically depends upon the fixed cost of the business, the fixed operational costs, and the liquidity requirements of the business model, and the tenure of the projects and the cash cycle basically. So this is what the operational leverage is, and financial leverage basically depends on the finance cost, like the debt, the fixed debt the business has taken. So the debt to equity ratio, which is basically a part of the financial leverage. So these two leverages, when these two leverages got merged, if both the leverages are high in a business, so they have a very high multiplier effect. And the infrastructure companies generally have a very high operational leverage. So basically, they have a very high fixed cost. They have liquidity issues. Debt realization is low, and debt realization cycle is very long, because most of the contracts are government contracts. At the same time, they have to pay to the vendors in a very short span of time. So I would say that if they want to make the business, I mean, the business of the infrastructure company can be commercially viable, but to make it financially sustainable, the business, the infrastructure company should keep a low financial leverage. I mean, financial leverage is something, by financial leverage, I mean the debts, the company should keep the debts low for the time of crisis. What we have seen during recession, what happens is the operational leverage of infrastructure companies was already high, and when and they were also having a high financial leverage. So whenever there is a recession in the economy, the whole infrastructure ecosystem in the economy got collapsed. We have seen the same thing happening in America also. In 2008, what happened was a collapse of the system just because of the financial leverage. So basically, if the infrastructure company keeps high liquidity in their business, they have to keep reserves of high liquid assets for, let's say, 5 to 6 months of operations, low financial leverage for the time when the business faces the crisis or economy is in recession. So they have to make it a financial sustainable entity. The operational leverages are already high. So this is what, when we restructure a business, an infrastructure company, So these are the key. The investor who is approaching such business to restructure, he must have liquidity in his hands, because infrastructure company is a kind of entity which requires, like we are seeing in the case of Vodafone Idea also. What's happening in the case of Vodafone Idea? Today, government is supporting Vodafone Idea, but they already have a very high operational leverage. But suddenly the AGR issue comes up and they have a huge liability. They are having high loans on high debts on their books. So the promoters or they need liquidity, they need funds. Airtel faced the same issue. They got the funds because they are having low debts. So Airtel successfully issued 20,000 crore equity, fresh equity, and managed the situation. But Idea Vodafone failed in that. Similarly, if we see Reliance Infrastructure, what happened with Reliance Infrastructure? So recently, Supreme Court ordered 6,000 crore payment from DMRC to Reliance Infrastructure. I mean, the total debt of Reliance Infrastructure is only 12,000 crore, and only one payment from one government entity is 6,000 crore, and that too is stuck up right now. So we can see that the entities actually are commercially viable. They are technically sound, but what they are lacking is the liquidity crunch, which I think infrastructure is one sector where government has the facility of sovereign wealth funds. Government can borrow the money at a very cheap cost, where the private player, the role of the private player should be of the technology part, should be more of a technology part. The funding requirement should be made by mostly by the government itself, and this is, I think, from my side on this point.
Sir, I agree with you. What you're talking about, the commercial, economical viable, only point is the liquidity crunch is there. Because now there is a fund available in India. We are talking about the national infrastructure pipelines, where I feel that there is more than 3,000, about 2, 6, 7, 8, I think, stress assets were available. So why these stress assets is not coming out of there to have a viability for that? So have any views for that? This is national infrastructure funds. They can provide the liquidity. If the commercial, economical, everything is viable, why these funds are not giving to these people to stress assets? Have any view, Mr. Jain?
So basically, the problem is, sir, the private players want a quick return. They want they want low duration game. They want quick returns, and the infrastructure game is very long tenure projects. The cash flow is low, funds got stuck up, lot of bureaucratic involvement is there. So these are the problems. I mean, so that's why I'm saying I mean, the government has to play a pivotal role if infrastructure needs to be built up in a country. And we have used this model since 1991, where we monetized our infrastructure. Whether we have a boot model, or we are having tools and everything, we are having those stuff. So we need to actually monetize our assets, our infrastructure. We have to make them financially sustainable, because John Kennedy, President of America, he said that America has a good infrastructure not because America is rich, but America is rich because it has good infrastructure.
Yeah.
And Singapore is one country in the world, and it's the first country in Asia which has built its world-class infrastructure in its country without investing not much amount from the government pockets. So it is possible. We have to, the government is finding out ways. It is looking for sovereign wealth funds which can provide money at a very lower cost, lower rates. Yes, but whatever infrastructure companies are operating in the country, the government needs to ensure the payments to them are made on a timely basis. Red tape is bureaucratic problems they should not face. Otherwise, I mean, infrastructure is one sector which actually, even after 1991, today also they are facing the same problems in getting most of their cases goes to arbitration. And I mean, this is the situation where private player actually becomes hopeless. So, I mean, there is a huge role to play by the government in this sector, I think.
Very important, Mr. Jan. Jan sir, one point is there is even the opening, we are told very clearly that banker is the major hitting under the stress assets because and banker has a shortage of funds. You can say with mismatch of assets liability statement because it is long-term fund. What do you feel about the refinancing under the sector? It is possible refinancing under this stress assets, or you can say for infrastructure sector. That is possible for that, as per your view.
So there can be several models. Already, government is utilizing, banks are utilizing several models. But like we have already discussed, and Chandrasekhar sir also very, I mean, meticulously pointed out that there are asset liability mismatches. And like you also said that the banks have a very low duration assets. I mean, in their books, the advances and the deposits are of very low duration. So it is not feasible for the banks. They can, I mean, on their portfolio, banks can't have, I don't think, more than 10 to 20% of their assets in the form of infrastructure lending. Because infrastructure lending is bank plays a very pivotal role because bank is a catalytic agent in any economy. So bank revives the economy, bank does money supply in the system. So bank, if money got stuck up in the infrastructure sectors, so other sectors will first thing, it is a very the huge liquidity demanding sector. So if the money got stuck up there, so other sectors will remain. So I mean, bank have to put a cap on what percentage of their assets they can keep in the infrastructure sector. So I mean, one sector from where we can get funds and for infrastructure development, and government is actually stressing upon that is the sovereign wealth funds, and it is asking for developed nations where the interest cost is very low. In fact, for this bullet trains also, like we were approaching Japan and all the developed countries for low cost funds.
Yes.
So I mean, in infrastructure sector is one sector where government should not be much dependent upon the private players. They should be dependent upon private players for providing technology and manpower and the engineering. I mean, the services, more of kind of. But the capital, because it has a very, government has to provide support to this sector, and they have to keep this sector a low financial leverage. Otherwise, it will never become financially sustainable sector. The kind of business it is, infrastructure business, it can't become financially sustainable unless the economic entity, I'm talking about the private business entity, unless the private business entity keeps its financial leverage low, it can't succeed in the long run. I have seen very big, huge business entities falling like anything during the time of crisis, just because of
just to add to your point on stress assets. So essentially, what we have done a few transactions where essentially the road assets, there we have been able to successfully stress asset. We've got foreign investors to buy out them from banks. So there are two things. One, especially on the road side, if the balance work to complete is very minimal, there are no approval risks left, and bankers are prepared to take a hit. That's where road assets we are able to refinance. All the foreign investors which look at refinancing.
Actually, Mr. Shah, that's I found from you, from Mr. Jan, this viewpoint of that. Banker take a haircut. No approval is required. Even some stuck-up projects, can see the light,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
can be come into the problem. If you're talking
No,
about the hydropower, even talking about the road project, where the private person could not complete it, and the banker ready to have a haircut and no approval, other things is required, and it can see the land. That was my point was. I
correct, correct.
thank you, Mr. Shah,
So see,
for
essentially
uh,
what happens is unless somebody has to take a hit, right? The developer, existing developer is already out.
you're
The
right.
equity
You're right.
becomes zero. So
Now,
the
for
project is not
insolvency or something
happening.
like that, no, sir, now it can
Something
be
you have to do.
changed. Management can be changed. For
Correct.
insolvency, IBC Act, you can say for this IBC code, say, काफी फर्क पड़ गया ना सर इसमें.
Yeah, yeah.
Then, Jaisal, I am thankful to you. I think you are the right person for infrastructure thing. If any point will be there, I will come back to you. Now I'm coming to Shri Sushil Kumar Bajaj. He is CEO, Sushil Bajaj and Associate, graduate in science, civil engineering, and postgraduate in the construction management, postgraduate in real estate valuations, 26-year experience in designing, supervising, and project management of civil engineering projects, officiating Honorary General Secretary of Practicing Value Association of India, Delhi NCR chapter. He is well known as a bridge between academy and engineering industry. So he's a very technocrat person. Lekin still I am asking him some question because, sir, this is a private equity and we are talking about the venture funds. How it is impacted on the infrastructure, sir? This is fine. Whether these venture funds or a private equity play a very important role. In a private equity, what I feel it, they are looking for the return on their investment, and it is a long-term investment. And what do you view for that, sir, Mr. Bajaj, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Uh, since I'm a technocrat, but with my profile, you'll find I have an association with a lot of finance people. So little bit of my experience is with this, and with I'm trying to study why this long in infrastructure projects financing is in not that easy as compared to the other industry and trade things. You see, I was reading somewhere else the total investment requires on infrastructure projects by 2030 is around 80 to 90 trillion in the world, whereas altogether all the countries contributing only $3 trillion per year. So no doubt there is a large gap between the fund supplied and the fund actually required. So whereas all the governments and super financial institutions and are trying together to meet that gap, but it is not possible and to in, in, without the involvement of the private equity and private fund or fund from the venture capitalists, as you said. But my predecessors have very well explained why they shy, why the VCs and PEC, you also said, why they shy away from this. And as Ms. Chandrasekhar is using, because all those people are, and they have got reasoning also for this shyness. They are and they are used to only for the short-term funds and short-term return, and they want a return very quickly. Whereas by nature, infrastructure projects requires a huge investment and payback period is long. That's one reason why you see this PE, VC are not one thing. They are not come forward. That's a challenge before the governments. The other thing which I feel as a technocrat also, sir, Mr. Shah mentioned about the pre-construction and during construction challenges. in pre-construction challenges, I also find that there is a less effort being done on the identification of uh, viable financial projects for venture capitalists. Although it is although I'm audible, sir.
Hi, audible, sir. Audible.
Okay. So, although fund is being desired from these PE and VC, but there is no some viable feasibility reports of projects in a smaller scale are being um, with the significant funding returns is being put forward to them. That's a one thing I feel there's a lack in this project, which we should work on it. Secondly, I also feel that PE and VC feel that there is a lack of control for them on the project which they are financing. Because in the large scale involvement of governments and other regulatory things, as you people have also mentioned in your mentions, so they feel there's a lackness of their own control because they don't come forward for this reason. So this is the area which one we should work on it. And as Chandrasekhar sir said, though they are implementing on this, working on the funds and all those things, that's a good idea. Let us see how much it works. Yeah, the one thing, the one model which is working very well in India and maybe other countries also, that is the PPP model. That's true, it's giving results. And but in PPP model again, somewhere the things are not happening because of political and regulatory support. So that that is one area where we should work on it. There's a more leverage should be given to the participants of private equity and VCs. You all from the financial area, you know, there is a lower adjusted rate of return, which is also one of the shine factor. That interest gap should also be I think personally feel, which will, if that is adjusted as per their attractive thing, that there can be one area we can see forward to PE and VCs. That's
Thank you very much, sir. Like, sir, you are technocrats because technology also play very important role.
Yes.
For the development of the, you can say, airport, you're talking about the ports, you're talking about the bridges also. So even railways also playing very important role for the technology, sir. Have any suggestion as a technocrat, sir, to these organization, to infrastructure companies?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, sir.
You got me. But I am asking, sir, being a technocrat is also very important, sir, to reduce the cost. Even we are talking about the road and how technology improved. If you see 20 years back and today, even a few minutes they can prepare one road or something like that. That is technology aspects. Previously, when I was a child, well, how they are preparing it roads. Now, immediately they get the thing done. Technology has gone up. Even for a port, for airports, and for a railways, technology has gone up. So, any views for on that respect, sir? Because being a technology,
sir, technology has come a long way, and it is increasing that time gap.
Sir.
So, reducing the time naturally it saves the money.
Oh, right.
See, there's a now you will find, and after 4 or 5 years, a lot of construction being done by 3D technology. The whole thing, there's very, very less labor involved. It's all a mechanized thing and computer based. and you have got a specified time, you have got specified cost. There is no cost overrun. There is no time overrun, which will naturally reduce the cost. So technology is still playing, but there is a one lack in this also. Technocrats also needs a little bit more space to in this financial funding and all those things, because I think in to say a simple thing in pre-feasibility studies, sir, very less time is being given to a technocrat to make a feasibility report, which can be very accurate. and that too, sometimes it is a copy paste only. So sure, there should be some optimism should be there. Optimum opportunity should be given to a technocrat. A good team of and should be a part of it. That will definitely affect on the cost of the project, and the fund agencies will also come forward when there will be a profit.
Very nicely, sir. You have covered everything. So my sir, submissions to you in this respect is regarding technology aspect. I think it can go a big way. So now I think we have tried to cover all our agenda items very clearly in this system when we are talking about. So what I feel, sir, essentially infrastructure development can signify promote economic aggregate growth and per capita output growth in developing country and elevates the income gaps of the residents. I think these are the lump sum. Infrastructure is most important aspect for any country development. So I think this is the nutshell of the thing. That's why whatever agenda item we have tried that our eminent speakers have tried to cover everything under the system. Now I'm requesting Sri Chandrasekhar sir. Chandrasekhar ji, have any view to our listener, because more than 300 participants in different places, whether you are talking about the Facebook or YouTube or presence in this system is there. So have any view from the IVS side to infrastructure, any your advice to the listener, to our entrepreneurs, even the bankers are also in this webinar. Have any views, sir? Last word for
There are two, three
advice.
issues, sir. If you look at it,
Yes,
much
sir.
of the problems faced by the infrastructure,
Sir.
2-3 areas actually. First, at the construction stage, actually implementation risk. Actually, the project are started actually without acquiring land. Project are started without taking the requisite clearances. Okay. And there are instances where actually the land acquired has not been paid for. Actually, there are agitations that have resulted stopping the. Or I have known of a road project where 99% construction was over, and there was around 300 meter stretch actually where a bridge has to be constructed.
Sir.
That portion was not secured, and the entire asset went bad because of this 300 meters.
I know that.
Yeah. So thing is, both from the government side also, when they are floating the proposal for any such project development, they should ensure that 100% things are in place actually, both in terms of land acquisition and also the requisite permissions. Actually, that's point number one. As far as the developer is concerned, the developer should be actually got a very clear plans. Actually, you cannot get into the project and start planning. Actually, ahead of implementation, you should have very good plans. And then also the infrastructure that is required for implementation of the plan actually. So they cannot be cringing on technology. They can be cringing on the equipment that are required actually. Most of the developers are actually they are hiring equipment from somebody else who has got this equipment. And if that at that point in time the equipment is not available, their entire project is stalled because they don't have the requisite equipment. Okay. And another thing is actually the attrition. The infrastructure is a very labor-intensive sector. Actually, it requires a lot of labor to be there. Actually, during the recent pandemic, actually, there are frequent shut off. Actually, frequent close downs. That has affected the progress, substantially. And the most important thing in infrastructure is actually implementation in time. Time is money there. Directly, it is direct time. A time money relationship is there. So even a day of delay is going to result in interest burden of crores of rupees, because typically there are high value products actually. So typically a project of 300 crores, 400 crores value, a day's interest will come to around 3 crores. So that is also very sensitive. The implementation schedule is also sensitive. So if these issues are taken care of, actually, by and large, I don't think there is major challenges in soon. And one more issue is actually the projections. In many road sector projects, I have seen the traffic projection that has been made was nowhere in near the reality. Actually, it was projected on a very high scale. So the project's economy went in for a toss. Actually, the actual revenues that have been coming in were not even 60% of the projections. Actually, so there are so many bad assets actually in a road sector, which are languishing for want of buyers, okay, because the projected revenues and the actual revenues doesn't match up. So these are all the issues actually. So our planning should be perfect, our preparation should be perfect, and our implementation should be perfect. If these three things are taken care of, there is nothing like infrastructure, sir, because as it is a long-term project and it is an assured return, and there is a assured return on capital that is available into this sector. Then there are other safeguards which are available, and as the economic development increases, the returns from these assets go on increasing, which is not being factored in the the assessment. Assessment is happening at a flat level actually of future cash flows. Whereas in practice, if you look at it, where the projects have been very well executed, the economy of the immediate surrounding areas, the economy booms actually, and then that brings forth additional cash flows to the developer. That is there's a bonus for the cash flow. So the implementation is the trick, sir. If we are able to implement it properly, well developed, well planned manner, and in time, actually, no project will be languishing. That is what I would like to say.
Thank you very much, sir. Implementation is the key. So how to plan it, how to implement it, and even for you're talking about the very 405 meters project could not be completed because total planning was not there. Excellent, sir. Excellent, sir. Now coming to Mr. Shah. Shah sir, hi, please, Bajaj sir. Bajaj sir, you want to say
Gupta
something?
sir, I want to support and endorse the statement of Mr. Chandrasekhar, where the technocrats are required and want to implement a thing. A right technocrat, a right place at a right time is very much required, which is a miss, sir. Which is a miss.
Without technocrats, sir, it is not possible to complete the project. Even by drafting your DPR, draft project report, technology aspect, bank, what you are asking for? Economical, technical viability study. Economic के साथ technology पहले आता है. Technology, you cannot survive, sir. I'm telling very clearly. Technology is the most important aspects. As if Mr. Chandrasekhar telling for some small portion, I remember that. In a Delhi, also in Dwarka, one patch was there about, you can say, 500 or 600 meter, some private company was there. So he was not allowing the access. Ultimately, Chief Minister had to interfere in that and get that from that person. Then that road was completed. That is a pakka, sir. Planning and technology play a very important role to complete it. Now I'm coming to Mr. Shah. Shah, has any last word for you? I think you are touched very rightly, sir, for your bond market or something like that. Any public issue also you touch. Any other things you want to say something, sir, Mr. Shah?
So I think essentially what we also, we were discussing off late about the stress of it. So essentially that's, whatever has happened. So, on the road sector, I think once the HAM projects have, been notified and we don't see any more BOTs, I think a lot of the problems that were there on the road sector, on the land acquisition side, right of way, non-completion, I think that has been addressed to a very large extent under the HAM policy guidelines to the comfort of lenders. On the other than HAM, I think more or less, EPC countries were in bigger trouble. EPC companies, if they leverage, underbid, the project is, the bidding is less than the project cost, I think there is no escape from it. Somehow we have to evolve that, we don't award projects just on the basis of the lowest bid. sometimes, if somebody has done a wrong calculation, ultimately everybody will suffer, even the authority will suffer, because the project will be left half and the lenders will ultimately suffer. So there has to be some mechanism where, even if it is bidded at a lower cost and the difference between the top three bidders is substantial, then there has to be a third party, assessment whether the bid at which the project is being awarded is viable for it to be completed.
Very nice, sir. Rahul Jain, sir. Rahul Jain, sir, have anything views, sir, regarding stress assets, and Mr. Shah is also endorsing? Have any advice to our listeners?
So basically, sir, what practically happening is when infrastructure companies assets got, loans got NPA. So generally the restructuring, the OTS, what banks offer generally offer is their loans are converted into equity or the term gets extended.
Right, sir.
So when banks, loans are converted into equity, the bank has no business to own equity in companies. So ultimately, the point I was making is like ultimately the money got stuck up. The objective of the bank is of having a bank in a country is to rotate the money, so that there is a continuous money supply in the economy. Or the second way is the extending the term of the loan, or restructure the loan. So ultimately, again, there is hue and cry in the market that NPAs are there in the bank and they are restructuring, they are increasing the term, they are not coming up with the actual NPA figure. So we have to find cheap source of funding for infrastructure development, and that fund can come from the developed nations, where money like Australia Sovereign Wealth Fund, there is a lot of money there. Japan Sovereign Wealth Fund, there is a lot of money there. That money can come from there only, and we have to find the ways to monetize our infrastructure assets. Whenever we develop a asset, whenever we develop a infrastructure, we have to find ways through which we can monetize that asset. We have to, the entity has to quickly move forward, and the stress assets also. The infrastructure companies, the banks that are facing the issues of stressed assets, infrastructure sector, they need to monetize. They have to find, utilize that commercial wisdom to monetize the available assets with the company. So this could be the way forward.
Very important. Monetize the assets.
Yes,
I think
sir.
it's an important aspect. Bajaj sir, you want to say something, sir? No voice. Your voice is not there, sir.
Yeah, can I get in, sir?
Now it is okay.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
sir.
I want to put forward one more point, that's on the transaction cost. Normally in project reports, feasibility studies, we take transaction cost around 2 to 3%. Whereas I have my personal on experience basis, this transaction cost goes to 10%, 8 to 10%.
Oh.
So that also gets the ill effect on the project.
Yeah, just to talk about
transaction cost means there's a liar's fees, unnecessary appraisals, and you can understand the other expenses involved in the execution of the project, which sometimes are not being taken into account. That's my point.
Sir Chandrasekhar sir, one point is there.
Yeah.
So if you can give a reply, how are these alternatives affecting the company capital structure? Capital structure, they are affecting it. I think they know capital structure. It is a debt funds which is available for the company. We're talking about the debt fund. We are not talking about the capital structure. So, have any views sir on that, Mr. Chandrasekhar?
So actually, no. If you look at it, typically the infrastructure projects are very high value,
Sir.
and I don't think any entity can bring in so much of capital I don't think across the world also, hardly in any country the capital is funding the infrastructure project. It's always be very insignificant portion of capital and a huge debt that finances is actually. That is the model everywhere actually.
Right.
But if you just look at it, sir, how they make it work abroad and why it is not working here is actually the implementation part of it. They ensure that the projections are correct. Actually, point number one, they ensure the project is implemented in time. Okay, these two ensures that the economics work. See, after all, before a project is being implemented, actually a lot of studies goes in as TEV studies and everything is done. Actually, what is the potential? I think so. Only after finding it, there is adequate margin which will be available to care of the the project. Actually, will be this one will be implemented. So that being the case, if as long as we are able to implement it well, as long as we are able to implement it well in time, the projects will definitely be successful. That's not the issue. The debt can be serviced. It's not the issue. Also, the cash flows should be adequate to take care of the debt. If you look at all the projects which have gone into trouble, is only on account of the inordinate delay in implementation. So that is eating away the entire cash flows.
Very nice.
That's one thing. Sir. Yeah, and then come to Mr. Rahul Jain's observation on the stress asset. Sir, cost of funding is one aspect of it, but other than that, there is another aspect which is the realizability of the stress asset. See, abroad, the average value that can be realized from a stress asset is somewhere around 73 to 74%. In India, the best of the projects have yielded only around 45 to 50%. That is the realization value actually. So if we can have alternative investment funds, if we can have investors who can develop these projects and taking it from there and create a sort of demand for this stress asset, and that will also be helpful, sir, for the banks. That's another observation I would like to make.
Thank you, sir. Another question is, sir, under what circumstances are these alternative goods or bad option? This is a good option or the bad option? Alternatives.
Sir, alternatives come in when there is a stress situation.
Sir.
And there you don't have a choice actually. So we cannot be talking about good or bad at that point in time.
You cannot say like that. Assets are assets.
Yeah.
You cannot say like that.
Yeah.
Another thing, what is the timelines for the real estate project funding? I think this is any views, sir, on that respect? Any timeline for the real estate funding?
Timeline means actually in terms of what you are asking, sir. Actually, timeline for
he's asking whether when the real estate funding can be period, you can say, as you are telling for SME sector or real sector.
Sir, actually, typically banks will go up to 5 years, sir. That is the comfort zone for the banks.
Yeah, in fact, that is the comfort zone. But real estate, strictly speaking, with a viable project, it doesn't need money for 5 years.
Yeah.
Ideally, I mean, if the project is not viable, it will not get done in 5 years.
Yeah.
You don't need any real estate project, irrespective of size. See, typically the debt has to come once the approvals are in place. If you are taking land funding, that's a different thing. And once the approval is in place, whether it is residential, commercial, real estate shouldn't take more than 5 years. Ideally, 3 years money should start repaying.
Yeah.
Well, sir, it will require 3 or 4 years to have a construction. So
absolutely.
Yes, sir.
When your construction is completed, I think then the repayment should
5 years door to door should be enough.
I agree with you, sir. I agree with you. There's no point for that. Sir, at the end, I am thankful to all my eminent speakers. So I am thankful to Mr. Rohin Jain, Rahul Jain, sir, Chandrasekhar, sir, Mr. Shah, and Mr. Bajaj. I think we talked in a practical aspects, not in a theoretical thing. Anything we discussed on the basis of our experience, long experience in the banking sector of Mr. Chandrasekhar, and having a long experience, Mr. Shah in the financial market, and Mr. Jain for the restructuring, and our Bajaj sir for a technology perspective. We are thankful to them. We are also thankful to our back team, Mr. Whether talking about the Surinder Pal, we are talking about the Lokesh, we are talking about Rohan, and we are thankful to Mr. Joginder who managed the things. Lastly, I can request all my participants of this webinar, because this association for the financial advisor was constituted with the aim to help and impart the knowledge sharing platform. So I request membership form are available. If they are interested, they can become the member, which give a more strength to the associations. And a research in India, sir, we are a merchant bankers. We are conducting technical economical viability study. We are doing valuation also. We are government advisory section also. We are also in solvency also. If any DPR other things are required, that resurgent can be helpful to them. So I'm at the end, on my behalf as a K.K. Gupta and the director of the Research in India and Association for the Financial Advisor, I am again thankful to my eminent speakers, to my the participants, and we are dependent upon your participations and giving us your feedback. So my request to all the participants to definitely give your feedback so that we can improve our next webinars. So for the series of this Research in India, we are having more than 120 webinars, and for this series of associations, we are having this 18 webinar we have completed. Beside the other SOCM or other things we are conducting on their behalf as a financial advisor or something like that. With this word, I'm thankful to you. I close the session with my thanks to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arbit, sir.
I'm really obliged for that. Thank you, sir. Thank you.